The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
From the Cumulus Studios in lovely Minneapolis, Minnesota, this is the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Across the studio from me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, we are back in the studios for a week, although looks like they're tearing up the studios because of us now.
We finally broke it to the point where to the point of no return.
It's taking on a full-on New York Rangers rebuild.
I tweeted this at you last night, but for some odd reason, I have no idea, it didn't load. Or yesterday during the day. We need to come up with a name for our equipment curse because it's definitely taking on a life of its own at this point.
Yes, we have had an enormous list of audio problems.
Like literally every piece of equipment we've ever used has betrayed us at some point.
Yes, it is. It's no longer comical. It's horrifying.
Oh no, it's definitely gotten to the point of like murderous rage.
Yeah. Quick promo before we jump into our otherwise fine show here today. If you do not know, this podcast is on SoundCloud. Do find us there. Search Giles and the Goalie. We have a nice, lovely channel there. Do check us out on iTunes. And if you do listen to us via iTunes, do drop us a rating. We certainly love those. Helps promote the show. Also click subscribe because that also helps boost up the show in the iTunes trackers. And then we have a YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Giles and the Goalie. And we do game previews, game recaps, when my equipment doesn't go to hell on me like it did yesterday. But I do look for that there. And then, of course, all of our podcasts are on the YouTube channel as well. So, again, just go to YouTube, search Giles and the Goalie, because we are not big enough yet to have a custom URL. So go to YouTube and hit subscribe so we can boost up our subscriber numbers and get a custom URL so I don't have to keep telling you to just search Giles and the Goalie.
We'll get there soon enough.
So, yeah, maybe someday.
Eventually. Maybe.
All right. So we got a lot. This is our last show before the trade deadline. If you can believe that. Never thought we'd get here so quickly, but seems just like yesterday. We were in this studio recording a marathon podcast about the season opener. But here we are now at the trade deadline. So away we go.
Woo!
Recapping the last week for the Minnesota Wild. Since we last recorded, the Minnesota Wild had three home games. Ben, did you know the Minnesota Wild are a very good home team?
I've heard they're very good at home.
Well, if you are new, you will not see that in these box scores here from the last three games. The first of which comes on Tuesday, the Minnesota Wild hosting the on-the-fly rebuilding New York Rangers at XL Energy Center. A 3-2 win. Eric Stahl, Zach Parise, although Zach Parise can send a lovely gift basket to Rick Nash for his goal.
Yeah, that was very fortuitous.
For the 3-2 win, as the Wild just narrowly get a win as they go up 3-0, and then the Rangers come back and make it an interesting hockey game, but the Wild secure the 2 points and get the win there. And then Thursday, the Minnesota Wild host the Washington Capitals. And, I
missed this game. So.
After what I said on the YouTube recap was a very lifeless first period, and I gave those who call the Wild boring, I said you can have that first period. I almost fell asleep myself. But Then the Washington Capitals decided to play hockey, or as I said, Barry Trotz made some adjustments to torch the Minnesota Wild. Tom Wilson scores a goal 1 minute of the second period, and then it is all Washington from there. Ovechkin scores, Backstrom scores, and Tom Wilson adds an empty netter. 5-2, the Washington Capitals win at XL Energy Center Thursday night. And we will get more into some post-game remarks later, but not a good showing for the Minnesota Wild against a playoff team at home on the Washington Capitals. Then to close out the week, the Minnesota Wild play the Anaheim Ducks. They lose in a shootout 3-2, and as I also put out in the YouTube recap, it just felt like the last 10 minutes of the third, no one wanted to do anything. Everyone just played so safe, just dumped the puck into the corner. No, nothing. There was nothing to be excited about in that hockey game in the third period, and it was dreadful. This is why I hate the fact that the NHL doesn't adopt a third point for a regulation win, because
it would make regulation.
It makes these third periods in big, meaningful games that much better when you have these two teams who just are playing for the point at that time.
Right.
That's just awful.
Yeah, it's similar to when they came up with the overtime loss to begin with, because overtimes were so unwatchable in the NHL at that point that they figured out that, oh, hey, wait, these teams don't want to lose a point that they already gained.
Yeah, road teams were just playing for the tie.
Right.
Literally.
And yeah, it definitely felt like that in the third period, and then I kind of felt like that. I mean, it wasn't that the first, I'd say, 3 minutes of the overtime were nothing to write home about either. I mean, that was pretty brutal, too. I mean, it did get a little exciting at the end there. The Wild actually did get some chances towards the end, but yeah, the last part of the game and beginning of overtime was, for 3-on-3 overtime, I didn't know that anybody could make 3-on-3 overtime boring, and the Wild pulled it off.
As Michael Russo pointed out after the game, that is now the 23rd lost point on the season where the Wild have had a lead or have been tied in the third period of a hockey game. 23rd lost point. We are only on February 18th of this hockey season, and the Wild have let 23 points get away. That is, and I said this again on the recap, it feels like they're going to miss out on the playoffs at the end of the season by a point. And then you can just go back and look at the stat and go, look at how many points they have let get away from them this year.
Right.
This is what it feels like it's leading up to. Like, that stat just continues to accumulate, and it just feels like with how locked the Western Conference is, the Wild are going to miss by 1 point. And credit to Anaheim, they're a good team, and they have just been plagued by horrible injuries this year. And
right. Without Ryan Kessler yesterday.
A lot of the national people continue to pick the Ducks to leapfrog back into the playoffs at some point. And, yesterday we saw, they're probably going to, for good measure. They are still a good team. They have just been plagued by injuries this year.
Right.
So that is not a game you wanted to, 1, lose, 2, give a point to a team you are trying to keep away from your playoff spot.
Yeah, and with Vegas suddenly becoming, the next incarnation of the 70s Canadians, there's a lot less margin for error. And we've talked a lot about how good the Central is, too. And so it's going to be that much harder for the Wild to scratch and claw their way into the Central top 3. And so now it becomes every game against any Western Conference opponent feels like a divisional game, unless you're talking the Yotes and the Canucks of the world. But every game against any Western Conference opponent means that much more in the standings because of that wild card situation.
I'll say this, for whatever team is the last wild card and goes to play Vegas in the Pacific Division bracket,
yeah,
I'm going to pick that team to roll through the Pacific Division part of the bracket.
If it's a Central team?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Obviously the Wild have done very well against Vegas. For what reason, I'm not really sure. But, yeah, I'd probably be with you on that. I mean, the Central right now it's an absolute meat grinder. And it kind of has been, last year was maybe a little bit of a down year. But you think of years before that, and it was too. I mean, years where Winnipeg made the playoffs, and Colorado has always kind of been a joke since the Save by Waugh, but
they're back now.
Yeah,
Nathan McKinnon is also returning. So
yeah, he did. So they're a little bit better than you would think, and I don't know. It just it's just a brutal stretch.
One last thing on Vegas before we quickly transition back to the Wild. I've been starting to watch them a little bit more lately because they're really good and everyone talks about them.
Because we're transitioning to being a Vegas Golden Knights podcast?
Correct. We'll be second in line behind the Sin Bin Vegas podcast. The horseshoe that is up this team's ass is just apparent night after night. Last night I'm watching them play Montreal and a puck redirects about 10 times right onto the stick of, I believe it was Riley Smith, and he has an empty net to shoot at on Carey Price because the puck redirected. It was like watching Plinko, if you're looking at an overhead view, and it just perfectly gets onto the tape of Riley Smith, who puts it in the empty net.
Yeah.
It's like, this feels like this is the kind of luck they've been having all year, and I get that sense more and more as we go on. Yes, they're a hard-working team, and they make their own luck when they work that hard, but at some point, man, that luck will run out. And if you are that team that is going to play them in the first round of the playoffs, you have to be licking your chops that is when it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you on that. And they're like advanced numbers and stuff are actually, depending on which ones you look at, they're kind of a mixed bag. So
they've been good.
They've been
lately,
good with shot share and all that kind of stuff.
But at the beginning of the year, they were awful.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think they're still shooting like, I don't know, something like 18% as a team or something absurd or something like that. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to. There's definitely another shoe that's going to drop there at some point. I mean, even though we do think they are a good team, I'm not 100% buying them as as the team that they. I mean they're leading the West still. So
if the Wild miss the playoffs, like just as a neutral observer, I am so stoked for the Western Conference playoffs. Like
right.
Just because of the total crapshoot it is going to be.
Right.
And I am here for it. Inject every single second of playoff hockey into my veins. Especially in the as Derek Peterson puts on his article today in The Athletic, the Thunderdome. It is the Central Division.
Right.
So, anyway, moving on to the news of the past week as we recapped all the games there. There's obviously a lot of news that kind of fills in between. We get to that here. First of which, Mike Greenlay, practice goaltender. Your thoughts? Do you have any?
It just furthers, and not that it's the worst thing in the world, because it's not. It's a cute story and whatever, and I guess he should be afforded those opportunities given how close he is with the team. But it just kind of furthers the whole thing that the Fox Sports North crew is a part of the team. You know what I mean? Like they are a part of the organization. Like there is no separation between team and press. Like it just furthers that for me. So that's kind of how I feel about it. It just I don't hate it. It's like whatever. They needed a goalie. Why not throw his comedic ass in there and throw some pucks at him? But it goes to show. It's just like that he's the guy they called. Not a college kid who actually can, maybe play goalie a little bit still or something like that, or
you,
or me, yeah, or any kind of deserving fan who probably should get his equipment clean before he puts it back on. But yeah, I don't know. It was just one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, well of course he did because he basically works for the organization. So,
actual news of the week, and follow up to our discussion last week, Michael Russo, The Athletic, noting that and now don't bet on a Matt Cullen trade, although Chuck Fletcher will obviously be evaluating the team right up to the February 26th deadline. We'll probably have a little more on him a little later, but...
What are your sources, Giles?
God.
How can you say that without any kind of verified sources?
And this is a follow-up, obviously, to last week, and I just hate parody accounts. Just almost, I should say almost all parody. There are actually a few good parody accounts.
I get along with like one of them.
Yeah, it's just... anyway, I'm not getting into that now. We got too much to go through here.
Right.
So we'll come back to Matt Cullen a little later, but obviously that was another newsworthy thing here from the week, and he's actually been playing really well here in the last week and change. So it would probably be not beneficial to the team now to move on from him as he's getting it going. But trade deadline, as we said, this is our last show before the trade deadline. And Minnesota Wild kind of up in the air right now what they're going to do, especially as Chuck Fletcher was heavily watching this team on this 5-game homestand that they just went 2-1-2 on. And as I did say in the recap, after I think it was both Thursday and Saturday's game, if you're Chuck Fletcher, you might be more inclined to make a move now, because this team just isn't there. And I don't know. It just,
I understand what you're saying.
As we go into the trade deadline, like what do you feel? Like what are you looking for? Because for me, I'm looking for something to shake up this roster, and I look for that as a more of a player for player trade, or quote unquote a hockey trade, not a rental, but somebody goes out and somebody comes in, and it kind of rattles the cage of this otherwise stale roster that just can't seem to get out of their own way.
We talked about it last week a little bit, and Pierre LeBrun joined Michael Russo on the radio last week and basically said the same thing. And to Russo's point, they have to. Like, that's the only trade they can make. They can't be even if they wanted desperately to buy a rental player and shell out an asset like the rights to Kaprizov or Greenway, which they don't, but they couldn't. They couldn't even do it even if they wanted to because of cap reasons. So, they have to make a hockey trade. That's really their only option. And to your point, I think you're right. I think a hockey trade would be better for this team than a rental because of the shakeup, because of the rattling the cage. Last year Hansel came in and that was a good trade, and he played well afterwards. But it didn't really rattle the team's cage at all. It just kind of, people blame him for their struggles, even though that was purely goaltending. But it didn't shake up the team at all. You know what I mean? Like it people think that it did because they went on a losing streak after that, but it didn't. I don't think it shook the psyche of this team to add a Martin Hansel. Whereas if you see a deal where you trade out, let's just say a Charlie Coyle, because that's the name that everyone's throwing around. That's a big deal. I mean, Charlie's been on this team for 5 years? 5 years now?
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, that's not small potatoes. That's not, oh, hey, we got this, we overpaid for this guy at the deadline, whatever. He's here to help us during the playoffs. He's here to eliminate Jonathan Taves. It's, you guys, like, we didn't have a choice. We had to make a move, and you guys are playing so crappy that we had to get rid of one of you and bring in someone else to light the fire under you a little bit, because there's a plus and a minus to it. This team, unfortunately, needs a fire lit under it all the time. We see it with the 7-2 loss in Winnipeg, a 6 or 7-2 loss in Pittsburgh, that terrible Saturday loss to Colorado. They need that fire lit under them occasionally, unfortunately. For some reason, that's a terrible characteristic to this team. But they respond to it. So, I mean, that's the upside to it, is that they do respond to being kicked in the pants. So, I don't know. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it's a little bit of both. But it just, that's what it's going to take, I feel like.
almost 2 months ago now, I wrote a thing on the Wild should more just stand pat at the trade deadline. Might actually just be a month ago, but whatever, who's counting? And I still feel like that wouldn't be a terrible thing for them to do. Or, you can sell off maybe a guy out of your bottom six, Stewart, to free up some kind of space so you can call up somebody from Iowa and inject some life into an otherwise trash bottom six. But still, that won't be enough for me to put any kind of money on this team in the playoffs, should they so get in.
Right.
More and more, I just get the feeling like this team needs a shakeup, and as you kind of mentioned, they've responded to that when it's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost something that they need to do, and if you're Chuck Fletcher, you're in the final year of your contract, you almost have to at this point just to inject some kind of life into this team, because otherwise, this team just gets into the playoffs somehow, and then they just go one and done again. Like, what happens to you then? Like, you got to find a way to shake this team to its core, because right now the core of this team is very much being put into the light for what's going on the ice, and it's not a pretty sight.
Right.
So,
and I think the summer trades this year was an attempt at that, but it didn't. Obviously, it didn't work out.
That was the equivalent to watching Shooter McGavin try the Happy Gilmore golf swing.
Absolutely.
He whiffs, and then he just looks around. Did anyone see that?
Yeah, Chuck Fletcher wished nobody saw this summer. But that's what he was trying to do this summer. But, I mean, the thing is, like, shaking up this roster by getting rid of Jason Pominville and Marco Scandella, I don't know, is that really shaking up this roster? I'm not like, it was a big trade, don't get me wrong, and obviously it was big enough to where it blew up in his face a little bit, but is that a shakeup of this roster? I'm not really sure that it is. Because those were guys that were kind of earmarked to go at some point anyway. Whereas Charlie Coyle, a guy that you have under team control for a while, a guy that you traded Brent freaking Burns for, that's a different story, and a guy that you and I both saw as a future captain of this team. Quite honestly, like that's a different story, and
whatever you do, don't go back and trace the origins of the Burns trade or make a trade tree of it, if you will. Don't do that.
No,
it's disastrous.
It's a total loss at this point. Yeah, I don't know. That's where he's at. I mean, especially with the contract. I mean, he's got to do something. If they don't win a playoff series, I think he's as good as gone. Even if they make the playoffs, I think it's a guarantee that he's gone. And even though I liked a lot of the moves that he made up until this past summer, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think am I afraid of the next guy coming in being worse? Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, obviously something needs to change at some point. Like it's a shelf life thing. Like with Mike Yeo, we defended him and defended him and defended him up until the point where it was kind of obvious that he lost the team. And then what? Once you lose the team, then what? And it's a different thing with the general manager, obviously, but I feel like he's probably lost the fan base at this point. I mean, obviously there's a section of the fan base that he's lost since about, 7 years ago, but it's just kind of where we're at now. So I don't know. If he doesn't win a playoff series, he's gone. With that in mind, he's got to do something, because this team as it is not winning a playoff series.
Right.
I mean, unless Devin Dubnyk becomes, peak Dominic Hasek during the playoffs, which is possible, but
Devin
not probable.
Dubnyk goes Jake Allen in the playoffs.
If Jake Allen can do it, can't anyone? I mean, honestly.
Speaking of Devin Dubnyk, I forgot to add in there at the beginning that he was named the third star of the previous week on Monday. He had, I think it was like a 940-some save percentage that previous week, and was really, really good.
Yeah,
and
he's been good lately.
Then he kind of let up a dud on Thursday, but we'll get to that in a minute. Another kind of trade deadline general thought before we jump back to Dubnyk. Ryan McDonough often comes around, like, people trying to throw out teams who potentially would have interest in Ryan McDonough of the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
Cretin-Durham Hall boy.
One of
For-
us.
For those wondering about Pierre Maguire. But, and on his last podcast, Michael Russo said that the Wild have seemingly interest in Ryan McDonough, but they're not sure, where he would fit.
Yeah, why?
So
You need another
my question is,
left shot defenseman?
does Ryan McDonough intrigue you?
Quite honestly, no. I mean, like another left shot defenseman? Are you kidding?
That was the first thing I looked up when I was listening to that. I was like, what hand is he?
Right.
And you see left hand, and then you're just
He's
like,
left-handed. Okay, so I'm looking at him right now. He's 49 games, so almost the whole season. 2 goals, 24 assists, 26 points. And that's not bad. I mean, that's like Suter territory right now, I think. And maybe he's a player comparable to Suter, but we have a Ryan Suter. And Jonas Brodin is... I mean, this is Jonas Brodin type numbers. That's Jonas Brodin is... Oh, he's worse than that, but...
Yeah, nobody has Jonas Brodin numbers except Jonas Brodin.
Jonas Brodin is 5-10 for 15 points, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. So Jonas Brodin has more goals than Ryan McDonough. That's the takeaway for me. He has more than twice as many goals. And Suter's actually having a decent goal year. He's got 6 goals, but yeah, I mean, he's I don't know. He's a Suter Brodin bridge almost. He's like between those two.
Offense has been there for McDonough before, and I think this year injuries have really gotten to him, and obviously the Rangers being close to dog crap have been probably played into that too. But it just, I don't know. Like, I would love to see Ryan McDonough come here and just imagine having Suter, McDonough, Brodin down the left side of your defense would be phenomenal. Almost Nashville Predators-esque in the playoffs last year. But with the Wild so tight to the cap, you'd have to move some contracts out, and I just...
Yeah, McDonough's on the hook for 4.7 for the next 2 seasons.
I just don't think there's anyone
for next season.
The Wild current roster that they would move out that the Rangers would otherwise have interest in. Especially with what the Rangers are seemingly trying to look for now. Ryan McDonough would come at more of a price of what you would pay a rental. Where you're giving up a pick or 2 or 7 or
Right.
prospects.
So how about this deal? How about McDonough for Brodin straight up? Because McDonough makes a little more, 4.7. He's on the hook for next year. Brodin makes 4.16.
Brodin is also horribly younger than McDonough.
Well, right, but it's 3 more years on that contract for Brodin. And is Brodin worth 4.16? I don't think he is. So it's kind of you trade, the little higher cap hit. You trade, you exchange that for youth, but then they also are taking a longer contract from you.
The other thing that frightens me about Ryan McDonough is this is a guy who has some history with concussions now. And
Right. I don't know that he would even be around a long time if they trade for him.
Right, because
he's only 28.
He's only under contract through the end of this year and then the next year.
Yeah.
So essentially, if you trade for him at the deadline, you're trading for 2 playoff runs with him.
Right.
And then he's going to be a free agent at the age of almost 30. So
Right.
I'm not sure if you'd want to bring him back at that point because, God forbid, this team needs another above 30 player on the roster. It's intriguing just for the next year and a half, but
Yeah.
I'm skeptical about what the return would be to the Rangers if the Wild did have interest.
Well, and not to mention, like I said, even with the McDonough for Brodin straight up, they still have to make up $500,000 in that deal somewhere. Because the Wild don't have $500,000 under the cap. They're not even close. So they still have to find a way to shave $500,000 off the roster before they can even think about making that deal. And that is a pretty straightforward deal. So, I mean, and then you have them taking maybe a Stewart or or something like that off your hands, or we could pray for Marcus Foligno, but that's just not happening. But then you're involved with shipping a pick along with it too, just to take that money off, or you ship them a pick and they retain some of McDonough's salary or something like that. So there's a lot of wheels in motion there. It's a lot of weird stuff, but I don't know. I just based on how tough it is, that's a deal they probably could pull off, but I don't know if they do just because there's a lot of complexity there.
So that said, the trade deadline on Monday, we've kind of gonna have like a grading system here of the Minnesota Wild roster.
Do it.
Who is seemingly movable as we approach the deadline, and we have a more unique grading system here, if you will. So basically, players we have who we think are just about close to movable is Dwayne Rollison.
Yeah, famous deadline rental from the Wild.
Goes to the Oilers. Oilers go to the Cup final. Rollison hurt game 1. Oilers lose Cup.
Right.
The maybe we have Nick Schultz, where he could go, he could not. It's up in the air. And as we all remember, Nick Schultz sent at the trade deadline, and I believe it was 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember.
That was really long ago. I remember I was sitting in the auto mechanic shop. My car was getting an oil change when that trade went down. So insider info there for you.
Right.
Little chance, but not a lot. We have the legendary Wild goaltender Nicholas Backstrom.
Gonna refrain from comment here.
And then no chance, Danny Heatley.
The Heat Daddy.
50-07. That's kind of our little grading system here. So going down the list of the Minnesota Wild roster, or do you want to kick this off?
We can just kind of bounce it back and forth between each other.
Okay.
Your grade and my grade, I think we'll be almost identical on them, but...
All right. First down the Minnesota Wild roster, we have Eric Stahl. We are going down by points scored.
Gotcha. I'm going to put him at a Backstrom. I think there's a shot, but this season especially, I think it's an outside shot. Just because he has a year left on his contract, and it's a insanely good contract. I know there was some talk about him being dealt before, but I just don't see how this team going towards the playoffs, I mean, unless what they're getting back is mind-blowing and makes my toes curl and other inappropriate things, I just don't see him getting dealt.
I'm going to put him as a Backstrom,
Yeah.
even though he has no trade clause. I think Chuck Fletcher making the deal.
He does. He just has a list
at the expansion draft to save Eric Stahl, and basically telling him, like, yeah, you're not going anywhere. Basically says to him, yeah, we have to be blown away by a return on what somebody's offering for you. So I don't think he's going anywhere. Not in this trade market.
Right.
Like it is so much of a buyer's market seemingly right now. With at least that's what we're hearing, is a bunch of teams more looking to sell off than take on. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what plays out. But anyway, no chance on Stahl for me. Mikael Granlund, I got him at a Backstrom level. No, not Backstrom.
Yes.
I have him at Heatley.
Oh, I had him at a Backstrom just because it's a never say never kind of thing for me. At least that's how I'm seeing it. But I'm kind of with you. I'd lean more towards the Heat Daddy on this one because, I mean, he's just too young, too good. They just extended him, for 3 more years. I just really, they've waited so long for him to come around, and he finally did. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Jason Zucker. I'm gonna put him at Backstrom.
Yeah, I think he's at a Backstrom. I'd put him more towards Schultz than than Granlund, just because he's a pending RFA, which, I think they'll have the space to re-sign him. I'm not worried about that as much. But, yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's entirely possible that happens. So, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll find out.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
There is a chance.
Okay, just for the sakes, we're gonna put Suter, Koivu, and Parisi all into the far and away Heatley column.
Oh God,
just
yeah. I mean, there's no
chance any of them are going. So we can just gloss over them. Matt Dumba.
I got him at a Backstrom. I don't think that he's. I think that he's the same situation as Zucker. He's a pending RFA. The team, I feel like they're really high on him. They obviously, like you said, spent a lot to keep him and Stahl around in the expansion draft. So, yeah, I just really don't see. I don't see him getting moved at this point. If they do, like I said, for Zucker or for Stahl, I mean, it'd have to be an incredible deal at this point.
Just for the sake of my own sanity, I have to put him at Heatley.
Yeah, I would lean that way as well.
He's a right-handed shot. He is top 5 in the NHL in goals scored by defensemen. Like, he's actually really played very well since that infamous third period where Bruce Boudreau benched him.
Right.
After that Jets goal where he just dropped past it right to the Jets player. And I don't know why you would move him. And in fact, like, you'd have to be taking on an insane game-breaking score for him to be moved.
Right, it would have to be like Dumba for Erik Karlsson or something like to that effect.
Don't you hate pants?
Karlsson potentially could be moving here in the next 8 days, which is
fighting Melnick's
fascinating. But
Melnick's is gaining more power in his team.
He appointed himself CEO.
It's nice when you can do that.
Yeah, must be nice.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You know what? I'm the CEO now.
Jared Spurgeon.
Spurgeon, I'm putting at a Heatley. I'm putting him at the big old Heat Daddy. Because at this point, I know that was topic du jour a couple of summers ago, but then they extended him, and I think they figured out, and they're paying an analytics team to tell them who's good, and if your analytics team can't tell you that just Jared Spurgeon's good, then I don't know what will.
Yeah, Heatley for me, just because, again, he's a right shot, and this team is just badly needing a third right shot defenseman, and
not named Nate Prosser.
Right, and it just would shoot yourself in the foot to move him.
Right.
So, Charlie Coyle, the big omelet.
I'm gonna be so sad if they deal him. That is a bit that should have taken off way more than it has.
It probably doesn't help that the big omelet show that we recorded it on has quite porous audio quality.
Well,
so trying to point that out to someone, here's the story. It's like,
yeah, but I mean, what show of ours doesn't have poor audio quality?
Well, I think the last one did okay.
Couple.
I had to do the Lord's work with that one, but I think it came out all right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I put him at a Schultz. I'm not ready to put him at Rolison yet. I don't think he's a rental to the point, or he's guaranteed to be gone like a rental on a bad team. You know what I mean? Like last year, everyone knew Martin Hansel was being dealt. Everyone knew that Kevin Shattenkirk was being dealt. I don't think Coyle's at that level, just because it would have to be a hockey trade for him to get dealt. Like, they're not looking to ship him off to a contending team for picks and prospects. So I think because of that, I don't think you can put. I mean, virtually you can't put anybody on this team at that level. But him, I don't know. But the Wild have to decide if he's a building block to this franchise. He's certainly a good player, and I think at this point we're starting to get into the territory where he might benefit from a change of scenery. Just because whoever we thought Charlie Coyle was, he hasn't been that guy just yet for this team. Like, as good as we think Charlie Coyle is, as good as we think he is, he's not that good. He's not as good as we see Charlie Coyle in our minds, because he just hasn't put it together. I mean, he's Granlund 2 seasons ago, and will he put it together? Maybe, but So I don't know. I just think that for that reason, it makes him kind of a candidate.
I think Charlie Coyle right now is towing the line between Schultz and Rolison
Sure.
level on this chart. And if I remember right, our friends over at Hockey Wilderness were big on the trade Coyle in the summer while his value was very high.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
maybe there was some credit to that now because I'm just more frustrated with his play night after night. And,
Yeah.
maybe a fresh start really would do him good, and it just seemingly has really gotten into his head that he's frustrated, and as we hear time and time again, he really beats himself up when he doesn't have a good night, and then it just kind of has a snowball effect, and here we are. So
is it too late to trade him for Alex Tuck?
Probably.
Really?
No,
Yeah.
I don't. I think there's another player on Vegas I would rather swap for. Just saying.
Really? You think so?
Just saying.
You'd rather have the golden child himself?
He's on pace to score 30 goals this year.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put that out.
Okay. Does he make more?
30 MFN goals.
Does he make more or less than Marcus Foligno?
Less.
Yeah, he makes less.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
This dry month is really killing me, especially this last week, man. I tell you.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to you for giving it a shot, but
Hey, I'm at day 14. Give me credit.
Braver man. I'm not saying you're going to fail at it. I'm just saying you're brave.
Well, I wasn't sure I was going to make it to a day 14. So we're here, and coffee is the ultimate equalizer for me right now. So
fair.
All right. Nino Niederreiter.
He's got to be a Backstrom. I mean, if you're dealing him again, it's similar to, like we said, with like Dunbar or anyone else of that stature, Zucker. I mean, a deal for Nino. Despite whatever Boost Boudreau's issues are with him, I mean, you really can't deal him for anything less than a deal that is crazy, like a deal that nobody sees coming. Right. So I don't know. That's where I'm at on him.
Yeah, he falls into the Backstrom category for me, but it's really close to Heatley territory just with his injuries this year. I think almost makes him untradeable right now.
Kind of, yeah. Knowing that he's hurt right now, yeah.
We're going to come back to him a little later as well for some other newsy topics from the last week, but yeah, I don't see it. And in a 5-year contract, like you would really be selling low on Nino Niederreiter if you chose to move him now. So that's where I'm at with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jonas Brodin, I think he's got to be a Heatley just because he's hurt.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'd put him at a Backstrom, officially, just because I think he can be dealt, but I really doubt it. Like I talked about that McDonough trade. I mean, the Rangers would have to be really kind of going out on a limb there to take a guy who's on the shelf right now. So, unfortunately for the Wild, it doesn't give them the flexibility. But I don't know that he was going to be dealt anyway. They spent so GD much to protect him in the expansion draft this year that they're still just gaga over this kid for some reason, and so yeah, he's not getting dealt.
Chris Stewart.
Well, in reality, I'd probably put him at a Backstrom just because nobody who wants him. I mean, the only way that Chris Stewart gets dealt is if the Wild pay somebody to take him. Like no two ways about it. They would have to be in a bigger deal. Like I said, the McDonough Brodin trade, you would have to send Stewart along with them and a pick. So that's the only way you're getting rid of that. And it's the last year of his deal. His contract isn't good. He's making 1.12. I mean, that's bad, but it's, I don't know. I don't think they're that motivated to get rid of it. But if they do, they're going to have to pay somebody to take it. And that nobody's going to take Chris Stewart for free, basically.
I'm going to put him at a Nick Schultz.
Oh, okay.
And this is just going to go kind of on a prediction for me, is that Chris Stewart had a little bit of a fire in his game Saturday against the Ducks after being scratched for 5 straight games.
Right.
And I think the Wild trot him out there in the next 3 games before the deadline.
Showcase him.
And if he has a decent 3 games, I think somebody might be willing to take a flyer on him just to take the contract off the Wild's hands. I think the Wild's return on that would be something along the lines of like cash considerations or
Right.
a 6-pack of Chuck Fletcher's favorite beer. But essentially, or, a conditional 7th round pick. Like, they're not going to get a lot for him, but somebody out there loves the sandpaper type players that Chris Stewart is, and if he has a decent 3 games here, somebody is going to be dumb enough to take a flyer on him.
Yeah, I hope so.
As I'm now beating the drum time and time again, when you look back at the expansion draft, I don't look at it as George McPhee is a genius. I look at it as 30 GMs are idiots.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really have to look at the players that they gave up.
So
I mean, everyone's like, why are they not protecting Marchessault?
Somebody out there is going to be dumb enough to take a flyer on Chris Stewart.
No,
so,
I hope you're right. God, I hope you're right. I just
that's why
maybe
I put
I'm
him
naive.
That's why I put him at Nick Schultz.
Sure,
Nick
that's
Schultz.
fair. That's fair.
All right, Joel Eriksson-Ek.
I had him at a Backstrom just because if you're making hockey deals, it's entirely possible that a young guy like him gets dealt. But talk about selling low. Holy Christ. It doesn't get much lower than what you would be selling him at right now. So he's a Backstrom, but he leans definitely on the Heat Daddy side. He's not very likely to get dealt unless some team, for whatever reason, really likes him.
He's a Heatley for me.
Sure.
Chuck Fletcher said that basically their top prospects, Eriksson-Ek, Cunnin, Greenway, Kaprizov, are essentially untouchable, and I'm inclined to believe him this time around because in the last year he's been burned on deals like that, so I got to think he holds on to what he has, and Joel Eriksson-Ek is going to start scoring at some point. Like, you're not going to shoot 1.2% for eternity. Like, let's be honest, folks. Like, just remember, this is just a spot-on comparison. But remember, Mikko Koivu was like this in his first year. Like,
oh God, you're really going to trigger people now.
Some men just want to watch the world burn. So let's give him a chance. And also, like, I've been banging this drum for quite a while. He needs to play with better line mates, and he got Parise and Coyle yesterday, and I think that needs to carry on.
Yeah,
you need to give him a long look with actual wingers who know what the hell they're doing.
I mean, he's still not shooting well, and that's well documented. But when he gets good line mates, like Coyle and Parise yesterday, he gets chances. And yes, he's still not burying them. We get that. We've watched the games too. But he gets better chances. Whereas, when you had him with the boat anchors, the Folignos, the Stewarts of the world, he wasn't getting any chances. And then, it makes it even harder. Then he's taking really bad shots. And that's how you get to a 1.8% shooting percentage. So he needs better line mates. He's getting good looks on occasion. And, I don't think it's a floodgates kind of thing, but I think that once he scores one, he'll stop squeezing his stick into itching powder and finally start burying a few here and there.
Right.
Maybe not as much as Brock Besser, but
Mike Riley.
Oh, I had him. Let me see. I had him at a Schultz, at a Nick Schultz. I think that he's. I wouldn't say likely to be dealt. I think it's a coin flip kind of thing, but I think he's an interesting prospect that teams might want to take a chance on in the Wild. I feel like their patience with him is maybe wearing a little thin. Like they've They inject Nick Sealer in, and Nick Sealer is kind of instantly better than Mike Riley, even though he's not as maybe as dynamic of a playmaker as Riley is. But I don't know. I think that it's entirely possible that a Riley, or we'll get to Olofsson and Sealer, but I think that it's entirely possible that any one of those guys is dealt if there is a hockey trade, just because of the expanse of left-handed young D they have.
Right. I'm putting him at Rolison.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's going to be in my Rolison tier.
Wow. Okay. He going?
You're really going to sell low on him, but somebody out there is going to want to take a flyer on a good, decent young defenseman like Mike Riley, and unfortunately it just hasn't worked out here, and I can argue he hasn't exactly been given the fairest of shakes, but with Gustav Olofsson playing really well in the absence of Jonas Brodin and the play of Nick Sealer since his call-up, I just don't see a space for Riley. And
right,
you can't send him down to Iowa. He has to clear waivers. He's not going to clear waivers, so you're probably just going to take a mid to low round pick for him, and there's plenty of teams out there that'll want to take a flyer on him.
Yeah,
so
I can see that.
I'm going to put him in the New York Rangers tier, and the Wild have been trying to move him since November, as it's been reported. So
oh, really?
They're going to move him in the next 8 days.
Okay.
It stinks, but he'll be in a Rolison column. Like, they'll really sell low on him, and just to move him on and get him off the books and make room for somebody else.
Sure.
Zach Parise. Oh, wait.
we already lumped him.
We went on it. Okay.
He's
Nate Prosser.
He's a heat daddy as well.
Yep, he is.
Who the hell wants him?
Imagine that.
Aside from this team.
Nate Prosser in the Danny Heatley column of this.
If Mike Yeo got rid of Nate Prosser,
his golden boy,
that like shows you the level, because we have an episode called Nate Prosser Bromance. It's about Mike Yeo's love for Nate Prosser. We talked about in that episode. If Mike Yeo is willing to jettison Nate Prosser for nothing, who the hell would take him? Aside from the team where, he's from.
Right. I just...
And I appreciate what he's done for this team. He's given them some stability at that spot. Firing Kyle Quincy into the sun was probably the best move this team has made all year. But, he's just, I don't know. I'd rather see Ryan Murphy in that spot, and I think a lot of other Wild fans would too. So let's just skip straight to that.
Yeah. It's Nate Prosser. He'll just be back again next year, let's be honest. So.
Can we at least put him in Iowa next time? Enough of these.
I'm pretty sure he is always on a 2-way contract. I'm fairly certain of that.
Really? Okay. Well, good. I'd like to see them actually use that.
Gustav Olofsson.
Him I put, like I mentioned with Riley, him I put at a Schultz, because I think they would probably rather keep Olofsson than Riley, but I think they do want to get rid of one of them, as you talked about them trying to get rid of Riley desperately. I think it's possible that they get rid of Olofsson instead. Lighter than Riley, though. I'm with you on Riley being the more likely to be dealt. So I don't know. I still think it's possible Olofsson is dealt, just because, like I said, so many left-handed young defensemen on this team.
And like I said, Olofsson's played so well
since
Brodin has gone down with injury.
And he played with Spurge yesterday. It was so exciting.
He's a Heatley level for me right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
You'd be foolish to move him. Like, if the defense is working rather well right now, and they're doing it without one of their top 4 defensemen, and as we saw yesterday, they switched up the pairs, and it actually was a pretty decent thing with Suter, Dumba, Olofsson, Spurgeon, and Sealer, Prosser.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be really curious to see what happens when Brodin returns and everything shuffles down by 1. But they're not moving Gustav Olofsson, and they've always liked him, and they've just been waiting for injuries to kind of get out of the way for him to to make this leap, and now he is. So he's not going anywhere.
No, that's fair.
All right, we're on to the goalies now.
Yeah.
Well, unless you think Nick Seeler's going to get moved.
I would put him at a Backstrom.
He's Backstrom.
It's entirely possible. Like I said, again, so many left-handed defensemen. Yeah, but I don't think that. Why at this point? You've got a cheap guy who's playing really well, and he was actually moved up for a little bit. He played with Spurgeon late in the game yesterday, and that might have been more to balance out the lines. I don't think that was a knock on Olofsson necessarily, but it was maybe to because Olofsson, it was maybe if anything a compliment to Olofsson because they kind of threw him with the anchor of Nate Prosser, but I think Seeler is playing well enough right now to where it'd be if they're getting rid of Riley, which I agree with you, they seem kind of headed towards. You definitely want to keep Seeler around as your next left-handed guy up.
Just for the sake of time, do you see either goaltender?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No, they're both solid Heatleys for me. It's unless.
Solid Heatleys.
Unless, I don't know. I don't know of an upgrade out there at goaltender that they could make.
There is none.
Right. Dubnyk is playing well, regardless of what people think of Dubnyk. And Stalock is a backup that's A, affordable, B, playing well, C, one of us. I don't see any moves being made there. It just doesn't make none of it would make any sense if they were to mess with the goalie situation. Even though it's not perfect, I don't think they can improve it without some kind of ridiculous expenditure.
Yeah. That is the trade deadline player ranking segment. Back to a couple of newsworthy topics from the last week. The first of which was after Thursday night's game, Bruce Boudreau called out his goaltender, Devin Dubnyk, and said he let in 4 soft goals. And then the next day, when asked, Devin Dubnyk responded with, "I don't want to get into it," essentially. And he responded well on Saturday, I'll say. But
I think he played well.
Just an interesting thing. And another nugget in the piece from The Athletic on Thursday night was that it was noted that there was a game in Chicago last March where Dubnyk was pulled in the first few minutes. Chicago had a couple goals. Dubnyk goes into the locker room because there's nowhere for him to sit on the bench.
Yeah.
So he hears Bruce Boudreau call him out on NBC.
Yeah.
And then we all remember how the rest of March went for Devin Dubnyk.
Sure.
So my question is, do we need to be concerned about Dubnyk's kind of mindset
mental
as
fragility.
we move forward? Because goalies are the weirdest person on a hockey team, and their mindset will essentially dictate if a team's going to be good or bad that night.
Yeah, I think there's some room for concern there, but I'm not concerned about it, if that makes sense. I'm not really concerned about it right now because, he did bounce back pretty well, so that's a positive sign. And I don't know that it was... It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. I don't know that Boudreau's comments last season were what sent Dubnyk into the tailspin that was the month of March. Like, he goes through those months sometimes anyway. So I don't know that it was Boudreau's comments that sunk into his brain so much that caused that month. So I'm not ready to say, Boudreau said he let up soft goals. Here comes a month-long slump. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not thoroughly convinced of that.
I'm concerned.
Sure.
Devin Dubnyk hasn't exactly gotten overly hot like we've seen in previous years.
Right.
Like I thought maybe that was happening in the previous week when he was named third star of the week.
Sure.
But then we kind of came back down to earth a little bit with that loss Thursday. And Bruce wasn't wrong when he said that those were some soft goals. Like the Tom Wilson goal was crap. And I'll say what you want about the Ovechkin goal or whatnot, but every once in a while your goalie is going to let in soft goals, and it's how you respond. And I don't think Bruce necessarily should have done that. If Dubnyk had been poor up to that point, then yeah, I'm all on board for him calling out Dubnyk there. But when Dubnyk had been essentially lights out for the last week and a half leading up to that game, maybe that was more of an indicator of, okay, Bruce, just give him a night off. Like,
right.
He needed to rest. Like, you were going to start Stalock on Tuesday against the Rangers, but you went with Dubnyk because he'd been so hot.
Right.
So when you ride something into the ground, yeah, you're going to get a performance like that at some point. It's going to happen. And it just the stats after that Dubnyk game from last year when he was called out and he heard it was he went 1-5-2 and his save percentage was .871.
Ugh.
Now, albeit he responded well in Anaheim, but the Wild are now going on the road for 3 games.
Right.
And we all know how terrible they are on the road and how their save percentage is on the road. So
Yeah.
I don't think that was the time to make that remark. If you do it at the beginning of the homestand, fine. I think you can get away with it. But when you do it as they're about to end a homestand and go out onto the road where they are just piss poor this season, that ups my concern level to, DEFCON 2.
Yeah. No, I understand. And I'm, I think this team goes as Dubnyk goes as much as we talk about.
That's exactly what this team is.
Yeah, as much as we talk about, the being disappointed in the forwards or how good the defense is, yada, 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 whatever. It's still a hockey team, and hockey teams go as their goaltending goes, especially in the playoffs. So, yeah, I'm with you. I'm waiting for Dubnyk to get hot, and I'm concerned. This is kind of where I think about Bob Mason, and I'm not completely, and I've questioned him before, but I think the thing is, he's good. Obviously, I think he's a good goalie coach. I'm not going to say that he's not, because he's obviously had a lot of good goalies here, and he's unlocked a lot of potential here. But I think that where he lacks is probably on the psychology side. We saw it with Darcy Kemper, who was, a shell of a goaltender last season. And now look at him this year. He's having a good year. He just needed a reset, a mental reset. Dubnyk, kind of the same thing. Dubnyk, when he is not confident, is not the same goaltender. You see him out of position a lot. You see him not playing big a lot. For a guy who's 6'6", it's almost impossible, but he plays a little small. So I think that's I think that kind of feeds into your concern a little bit, is that I don't know that Bob Mason is particularly good at controlling the emotions of his goalies or managing the emotions of his goalies. And like you said, Boudreau didn't do him any favors this week. So,
and the other newsworthy thing here this last week was on Saturday, Niederreiter was put down on the 4th line.
Yeah.
And he had like 2 shifts in the third period past like the 12-minute mark or something, and almost redeemed himself in the shootout. But this kind of became a Twitter talking point, as we had some good discussion on should Bruce have done this?
Sure.
And Niederreiter had his 5th penalty in like 3 or 4 games. I can't remember the game total, but it's been like his 5th penalty. And, even when he took that first penalty, I was like, man, you got to be kidding me. Like, what? Why? Like, this is a concerning trend. And, the Ducks score in that first power play,
Right.
go up 1-0, and eventually the Wild come back. But then Niederreiter took another penalty, and Bruce finally said, "Okay, enough's enough. Like, you got to do something to shake this trend." And so he put him down on the fourth line, and I said I agreed with Boudreau for putting him down there. Like, you got to figure out a way to shake this trend, and this is going to be your way to do it. Like, you're not going to fully bench Nino Niederreiter for a game. So try to take the Matt Dumba approach you did from a few months ago, where Matt Dumba was benched essentially for an entire third period, and he has been great ever since. So I thought this was the only card Bruce could play to try to shake this trend of Niederreiter taking penalties, but there's an argument out there to be made that Bruce shouldn't have done that at all.
Yeah, and I was on kind of that side where I feel like you play your best players, but the concern in this was brought up, I believe, by Tony from Hockey Wilderness, is that maybe he's taking these penalties because he isn't 100%, and he's obviously not 100%. We've been told that.
Yeah, and we've been told essentially he won't be 100% at all this year.
Right. So that's kind of like where it's, does he need to learn to play a little cleaner at not 100%? Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess there's a point to that. But I just worry that, it's kind of all for naught. If he's not 100%, then, he's unfortunately maybe going to take penalties on occasion just because he's not able to keep up with other players. That leads to a whole other litany of questions where it's just like, well, why is he playing then? And this, that, and the other thing. But I don't know. I wasn't so much against it in the short term. I think, you demote him, I wouldn't even demote him. That was maybe more of my issue. You want to bench him, then bench him. And that happened in the second period. So bench him for the rest of the second period. But then in the third period, I think you still need him there. I still want to see him out there versus Daniel Winnick, who replaced him on that line. Like, I think if you just bench him for the remainder of that period, I think the message is sent. I think that you don't need as much. You don't need to be so severe as to essentially bench him, demote him, / for the rest of that game when it's such an important game. If you're playing the Yotes, maybe. I mean, you still need every point, so that's kind of a silly thing to say, but I would have rather seen him, punished very temporarily, because I think that would have sent the message enough. I don't think, these aren't children. They're adults and they realize what's going on, and he messed up, and I don't think we should be so foolish as to think that he's not aware of himself taking bad penalties. But yeah, I would have rather seen it more temporary.
In that piece in The Athletic after Saturday night's game, Niederreiter revealed that he injured the same leg that he injured early in the season in Chicago when he had a high ankle sprain. So after missing 5 games, after getting hurt in Florida, he scored a hat trick, played one more game, and then was out again. And then he revealed Saturday post-game that it was a fractured fibula.
Right.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
First of all, why?
Right.
Why is he out?
I know.
This is almost Minnesota Twins level of angst against the team doctors.
Yeah.
Like, for years and years and years, the Minnesota Twins have been awful at, they have let a player just sit on the bench to try to ride out an injury instead of putting them on the DL and calling somebody up who can be of use. So they wait almost a week and then they make that move, which aggravating. Why is Nino Niederreiter playing on a fractured fibula?
I know. I don't know.
Why? Like, I get it. Like, hockey players, they don't like to be told, you're going to get this fixed. You're going to miss, X amount of time. They hate being told that.
Sure.
But, man, injuring that more is terrifying. It is dangerous. I don't understand. And clearly he's still playing on it, and
which is baffling as well.
Which is probably more to do, as you said, of why he's been taking these penalties. But I don't know if. I guess I'm not sure what an injury timetable is, and we might have to consult the zone coverage injury expert, Lucas,
right,
on what his return would be. But man, I'd almost just why didn't you just get that fixed right then and there, and you might have had a shot at getting him back for the playoffs. But I guess when you just want to ride it out, you're going to ride it out, and that's where we're at with Niederreiter. So I'm
with you. I don't get it. I don't know. I'd like to see them. I mean, you don't want to see him on the bench necessarily, or on IR if he can play, but it's not like he's playing particularly well right now.
And when you have him for another 4 years and you know what he can do when he's fully healthy, I just don't get why you roll the dice like this. But we can argue about this more later. Moving ahead, looking at the Minnesota Wild week in advance, they are now out on the road. They have a swing through the New York metropolitan area. Mm-hmm. Monday afternoon, a noon start, I should say. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's
they
be
play
fun for me on the West Coast.
The New York Islanders on President's Day. Did you see Anders Lee turn down money from fans who wanted to donate to his charity? And these are the same people who are putting money together for a Fire Gar Snow billboard.
I think the latter might be a better use of their money.
Yeah. The Islanders at Barclays Center on Monday. Then the Wild have a few days off. They play at New Jersey on Thursday. Mm-hmm. And then Friday at the New York Rangers to close out the week. No, Sunday they play too. Home against San Jose.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So, and then the trade deadline will come next Monday. So that's the Minnesota Wild week ahead, a full week ahead here. But general thoughts on the week ahead here as the Wild are going out on the road for 3 games.
Well, I think they're 3 winnable games. I think you have to look at them as, that's time to make hay. You really gotta. if you can't get some points this week against teams that are, the Islanders are a tire fire. New York has already, they haven't packed it in yet, but by Friday, maybe they have dealt some big pieces.
Yeah, I was gonna say they could be without Rick Nash or Michael Grabner or McDonough. Or, the list goes on. Their roster could look considerably different.
Right. And New Jersey has been, surprising everyone this year. But that's still a team I feel like you got to beat. It's a wild card team. But I don't know. I still feel like you Jesus Christ, so are the Islanders? How did that happen? How bad is the East?
Well, the bottom 4 of the Atlantic is god-awful, which the Wild aren't getting. But
right.
The Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils, they're all not far out of a playoff spot, but they're all kind of drifting away from said playoff spot.
Woof.
So the bottom 4 of the Atlantic, though, just kind of reminds me the bottom 4 of the Pacific Division. Right. Just terrible. That's where everything kind of piles up and whatnot. But anyway.
So I don't know. I think they got to get points this week. They're a lot.
You have to win 2 out of these 3 games.
At least. It really is a week. Even though you're on the road, they need to get over this whole road thing. And, FSN will tell you all day that it's confidence on the road, whatever. I've cited that it's matchups because their bottom six isn't as good anymore. But that's still like you still need to find a way to overcome that. You still need to find the matchups that work for you. You still need to find the line combinations, more or less, that work for you so you can play with teams that have the matchup advantage at home. Like, you need to find line combinations where you're not, on the road, you're not killed by matchups every time. And I feel like that's what they have been. And are those matchup combinations there? Well, I don't know. Maybe they're not. But if they aren't, then, this is going to be every road trip's going to be just as rough as the ones before. And I don't know that you're going to make the playoffs playing that bad on the road.
And as we record here, the Wild have, what is it? They got 24 games left. 14 of those come on the road. They only have 10 home games left.
Jeez.
Because of all the events that are now packed into Xcel Energy Center.
Right.
The Wild have, and this is every year, the Wild have a very road-heavy schedule going through March.
Yep.
So that is definitely a concerning thing to look at here as we talk about getting past the trade deadline, final stretch of the season. The Wild have more road games than they do home games, and that's a concern. So that's what to look forward to this week. On to the mailbag, ever so quickly. We put it out on our Twitter account. I think I forgot to throw it out on a Facebook page.
Yeah.
But Twitter account at GATG Wild Podcast, Facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. Mailbag questions. As this is our last show before the trade deadline. So we are going to check the mailbag, see what we got. First question from Kelly Riley. When does Chuck Fletcher trade Charlie Coyle for Marion Gaborik?
Well, somebody already beat him to the punch now, didn't they?
Hey, that'd be another salary dump for Ottawa.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's entirely true.
So that's for the... Realistically, that's not happening. But
no, it's not.
So
don't
bother. This one we kind of hit on from Kelly Riley. Do Wild fans think McDonough would be a good fit? He's old, concussion prone, probably wants good money. But yeah, we touched on that, and we're not sure where the fit would come, and it would probably have to come at the expense of trading a Jonas Brodin. But yeah, I don't see it. So
I don't either. And especially with the money, unless it's Brodin and Stewart for McDonough, I mean, I should say Brodin, Stewart, and something else, and probably a high pick. Yeah, I don't know.
When will the Wild have a players-only meeting over under 2 weeks?
You gotta think it's on the horizon, right? Like, They're getting to that point where it's getting desperate.
After the road trip.
Yeah, maybe on the road trip. If this road trip doesn't go well, maybe after they lose the first 2 games, maybe it's after the New Jersey game, or before the Rangers game. Maybe, I don't know. It's sad that that's become so cliche, but
yeah, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen soon because there's not a lot of time left to do that. So will the Wild actually trade something from their core? 5 years of disappointing playoff runs is enough for these guys. We also kind of touched on that. And
depends on what you think the core is.
Yeah, I think looking at your core players, you've got Koivu, Parise, Suter, and then I put like Granlund, Niederreiter, Coyle, Spurgeon, Dumba in that column.
Sure.
So I think we've kind of pegged Coyle as the one they would probably move if they're going to move anyone out of there.
Yeah, so, anyone thinking that they can somehow miraculously find a way to deal Parise, Suter, or Koivu, number one, they're not dealing Koivu. You could trade because his deal starting next year is a little bit easier to swallow, but and not a long deal. But they're not going to trade him. Parise and Suter, you flat out cannot trade. Like, there is a 0.0 chance that any team is taking on those contracts. 0.0. Like, this isn't a oh, let's laugh at how bad Dion Phaneuf's contract is. No, it's worse than that even.
What do you guys think about the Mighty Ducks TV show idea?
It's just gonna disappoint me. You know, like I hate to be that cynical about things, but there's no way it's gonna be good, right?
Why do you hate things?
I want it to be good, but there's no way. They're gonna shoehorn in stupid. It's gonna be a soap opera. It's gonna be they're probably not even gonna even play hockey. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm in between.
Yeah.
I always have hope for something labeled Mighty Ducks.
Well, yeah.
From our friend Joe Bully, can the Wild sell and still be in a position to get stronger by bringing in Greenway and Cunnin after the trade deadline?
I don't know that Greenway is going to go straight to the Wild, or to the Minnesota Wild at least. Do you?
He's pretty much been tabbed as going to the Wild. Like
to the Iowa Wild, though. Can he come all the way up to the NHL at this point? I mean,
the Rangers did it a few years back with Chris Kreider. They signed him out of college. He came up, played on the roster at the end of the year, and then into the playoffs. And Greenway is on the part of the roster where he is eligible for the playoffs. So,
right. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd like to see it just to see how it works and just to shake up the roster, but I don't know that it's... I don't know. I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't know that that's... I wouldn't count on it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And Cunnin, I would like to see Cunnin up, but they got to make room for him somehow. They got to jettison a Stewart, or I pray that they could jettison a Foligno, but I don't know.
Last one from Jesse D. St. Hubert. If the Wild add Nash from the Rangers, can we just fire Fletcher into the sun?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, number one, there's no way you can make that. So they would have to trade somebody like very expensive to even fit Nash in. So I don't know if
he pays the price for Rick Nash, then yes, by all means, fire him into the sun.
If you can trade for Rick Nash and you can ship out Tyler Ennis and Marcus Foligno, you give Chuck Fletcher an extension and a raise. I mean, I'm only kind of joking about that, but I think there's situations where, like, because there's so much money that would have to be moved to bring Nash in, if you can dump off a bunch of dead money like Foligno and Ennis, for instance, I think that would be amazing. That and Nash is on the last year of his deal, right?
Yep.
So
he's a free agent.
God, yeah. I mean, that's like NBA money moving crap right there. That's what that is.
That's the mailbag. Thank you to everyone for putting in their questions. On to the Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before.
If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
Bruce Boudreau quote of the week. This came very early in the week. It was after Tuesday's game, I believe. It was Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was before Tuesday's game. Boudreau on facing Washington, Anaheim after the Rangers game. He says, I want to beat the Rangers tonight, but I want to destroy those other teams. Who likes a team after they fire you? Not I. So that didn't go well for Bruce.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's... I'm with him on that. I mean, I love vindication more than anything. And I've been fortunate enough to feel some in my life, so yeah. Sweet, sweet vindication.
Yeah.
Too bad it didn't go Bruce's way in either game.
Yeah. So that's the Boudreau quote of the week. I think we're gonna gloss over the weekly wager this week because
we can pick that back up.
The bet from last week is on its way.
Oh, okay. Did you order?
The punishment for last week's bet is on its way.
Oh, yeah.
I did order it, but it wasn't in stock until, I think it was like Saturday, so it didn't get shipped out till Saturday. So. All right, jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
The third jersey we are going to be imagining on the show this week is
The Islanders.
Oh God. Okay. No Gortman's Fisherman.
I struggle to think what they could even do for a third jersey at this point.
Just honestly, don't go with one. You have
that's a
you
fair
have
point.
swung and missed so many times on third jerseys.
I know.
Just stay with the classics that you wear now. It is a good look. Like, no one will think less of you if you don't, but because there are teams that need the money, like the New York Islanders,
right.
They're going to come up with something.
Yeah, I don't want to see black again. I don't want to see orange. I don't even know what I want to see out of this team for a third jersey. Like, if they're going to do something...
They'll probably do some kind of rehash of that black Brooklyn jersey.
Yeah, I don't want to see that either, because then like you're going to pay homage to a city that doesn't want you and in an arena you don't want to play in. I don't know. That seems kind of weird, right? Like, if anything, play more homage to Nassau and the people that do love you. You know, like,
right.
I don't know. I would almost like to see them go something more simple. Like, I don't like their original black third jerseys that just said Islanders on them, because you know the format of the jerseys themselves sucked. But if you just went something simple like that, if you have to have a third jersey, which like you said they probably will, go with something simple like that. Go with just, you know, a very old school looking, kind of simplistic Islanders, you know, just a variation on the template that they have now. I don't want to see them go black. I don't want to see the Gorton's Fisherman again, as much as we loved it in its time, or as much as we loved it, hated it, or however you want to look at it. Yeah, don't go navy, don't go black, don't go orange. Just stick with what works.
They weren't far off when they had their first Stadium Series jersey, or I don't think they were, maybe something similar to this, with the NY on the front, and
yeah,
you know, they kind of had a little variation of the orange and white stripes, and you know, maybe there's a variation of that to be had that's, you know, it's different, but it's not far from, you know, what they already have.
Yeah, that one
I think
don't
that's
mind.
probably the closest thing they've had that's looked good.
That's probably the best third jersey they've ever had. And that's not, I mean, saying that it's a great jersey by any stretch, but yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about an Islanders third jersey.
Sure.
Although, watch, they just put out something orange like the Islanders.
Like the Oilers?
Yeah.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yikes. So,
yeah.
All right. We've gone on long enough here. We crammed a lot in, so we can probably wrap this one up.
Sure.
Thank you to everyone for listening. We will be back on Monday, post-trade deadline, with a show. And so for now, this will be all you have. You can find Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Find our podcast on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. You can find the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. SoundCloud and iTunes are the two big places to find this otherwise fine show. Go to SoundCloud, search Giles and the Goalie. iTunes, search Giles and the Goalie. We are there. If you do find us on iTunes, hit the subscribe and give us a rating. Helps us a lot.
All right.
Ben and I write for a website called zonecoverage.com. You can find our work at zonecoverage.com/wild. If you're a Minnesota sports fan, just go to zonecoverage.com. We've got a lot of great stuff there. And all the podcasts go to zonecoverage.com as well. We have a great podcast network. If you love listening to other sports, we got a lot for you there. So do check that out. So for Ben Remington, this is Giles Farrell, and we will see you next week.
Later.
not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.